maybe let's move on to some of the meatier topics. So I think everybody is kind of abreast what's going on in the Heisman. We just talked about the conference. Let's talk kind of the college football landscape. That's, let's call it since the beginning of the year, but we've got NIL, we've got the transfer portal. It's already this offseason kind of changed shape of some college programs, including my own. But then also the collectives. I don't think a lot of people understand how this is all going to work. And so you're always well-read and knowledgeable on college football. I wanted to give you kind of the mic to give me your thoughts on all of this in any order you see fit.
You know what? Let's start with the collective, because I think that's new. It's interesting.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of uncertainty around it. And truthfully, your school is kind of taking the perfect status quo, because I think there's two forks in the road.
That's
and
right.
I think USC is the perfect example of how this is going to go moving forward. So maybe you can fill the audience in on what USC is doing specifically, sure, and we can go off that.
Okay. Yeah. So that's, I may know more about this than some folks just because I'm a Trojan fan and I've been following all the threads in the board. So, excuse me. So we essentially have two collectives. The first one that is quote unquote affiliated with the university is called Boulevard. It's an acronym, BLVD. And they've already signed up deals with like Mercedes and all this. And what they really do is they sit on top of the university and all the players in that NIL program for the collective. And they go out and get sponsorships and advertise different things that are going to pay the collective, which in turn pay the student athletes. So that's the way it was being done. The Boulevard is our university sanctioned or sponsored, or however you want to put it, right? I don't know the right term.
Another department in the athletic office.
You got it, right? That is now going to handle this new NIL world. Right. So that's Boulevard. But what started to have happen was the alumni, now that they're re-energized with what's happened in the program with Lincoln Riley, et cetera, started to get involved and say, okay, well, where's the money coming from and how much is actually getting to the student athlete? And so there's been some, again, I'm not going to air too much dirty laundry from the Trojan world, because we've done that enough in the last 2 decades. But there was some semblance from some of these alumni looking deeper into it that it was like 40 or 50 cents on the dollar that was being given by the sponsor was actually making it to the players. And then that has to be divvied out according to whatever the university decides. So the alumni got pretty upset going, well, where's that other 50% going? Is that going to administrators? And they're like, no. We're going to start our own that we drive and we demand. And so they set up an additional collective that is not affiliated with the university, but it is run by boosters and donors. And it's called Student Body Right, which for anybody that knows USC old school, that's kind of what we used to do. Marcus Allen, right? Charles White, et cetera. So Student Body Right is still working within the constructs. They don't want to be banned by the school, right? They don't want this no-known to blow up, but they want to have the freedom to direct those dollars how they see fit versus how the university administrators see fit. And so that's where I think it's really interesting, because they might be able, again, this is all hearsay. I don't know how it's actually shaking out yet, but they could determine, I want to pay this guy the $1 million that's being given to this guy for $1 million. And that would be attractive to the guy that's going to make $1 million versus that $1 million goes to Boulevard. Half of it goes to the school. And now you're splitting with 57 other guys, the $500,000. Right. So I don't know that that's the ins and outs of exactly how it works, but I do know that one is school sponsored, one is being run by alumni and people that have interest in the university and have deep pockets and connections. And so we've seen there's a couple other schools, and then I'll let you jump into this. I should have reviewed it, but I'm not remembering. There was, I think it was A&M, and I think there was one other SEC school that was doing something similar. And so that's why our alumni followed suit. They said, don't let these guys run away with this new model. And we're sitting back here giving half the money to the kids and it's all split up. We need to get in front of this. And so that's where Student Body Right came. So anyway, help me understand from your narrative and understanding.
Yeah, one more question for you about the Boulevard and Student Body Right. They announced the big Mercedes sponsorship today.
Yep, I just saw it today, right?
Was that Boulevard or was that Student Body Right?
Good question. I think it was Boulevard. Okay. I read an article, but I did not see who underlying. The reason I think it's Boulevard was because our coaches, this is a so for those of you who don't know, there's a dealership in Los Angeles, a Mercedes-Benz dealership owned by an alumni. And he already had an agreement in place with the university previously for the coaches to give them discounts or whatever. So they were driving and buying from him. And so I think it was just a natural, hey, well, we're helping out the coaches and now we can help out the kids. That's what leads me to believe it's Boulevard, not Student Body Right. I'll check on that, for anybody that watches this later, but that was my understanding.
And then I have one more question. Are both these collectives, are they go, because there's a theme, some are going the nonprofit route,
yep,
some are going the private LLC route.
Yep. Which
way is which for the USC pair?
Great question. From the early readings that I was doing on this, I was hearing they were 501c3, which gives you that nonprofit status. Right. I'm not certain that student body right falls under that. They may or they may not. So I'll just have to say I don't know, because I can't speak here off the top of my head without knowing the answer to that.
Okay. So that's a very interesting thing that's going to come out of this NIL thing. Mm-hmm. Right now, it seems like these collectives across the country, Texas Tech has a huge collective, mm-hmm. Alumni and Booster Ran, nonprofit.
Okay.
Notre Dame has a school associated one, much like Boulevard, nonprofit.
Okay.
SMU just created a big one, private LLC.
Interesting.
Texas A&M, private LLC. Alabama, Georgia, look like they're going the private LLC route. And the reality is that these are large sums of dollars, mm-hmm. millions of dollars being put in this collective. Yep. And the thought being is that the IRS is going to have a serious issue mm-hmm. with these being tax deductible donations. Yep. So your football team wins 9 games instead of 6. Yep. And that's what kind of is the big unknown with this whole collective space is how do you even form one? And are we setting our boosters and donors up for an unpleasant experience with the tax man,
yep.
A couple of years down the line?
Well, and just to add to that, seeing that the IRS has been funded with $80 billion just a week and a half ago, that's probably a very, very good concern to have.
The IRS likes headlines, and going after a bunch of boosters is a good headline. So it's going to be very curious to see. The other side of it, and why I think USC is such an interesting case study, is you're starting to see these rival groups supporting the same cause.
Right.
So you have your traditional athletic departments and the in-house collectives, and then you have your out-of-house collectives. And talking to people who work in athletic departments is that now it's almost a competition for dollars. That old Toyota dealership that used to sponsor the athletic department to the tune of $250,000 a year and get their tickets, but then the facility fee was $240 of that, $250,000. Right. Well, they're not so quick to write that check anymore.
Right.
They're more willing to say, hey, let me go this other route. Let me go straight to the kid. And instead of paying $250,000, it's like, hey, how about you get a Toyota, you get a 4Runner, and you get this. I'll give you guys each $10,000. Now all of a sudden I'm pocketing $250,000 and I'm getting the same ROI marketing way.
Yep.
And it's going straight to the kid.
Yep.
And that's actually created a lot of difficult conversations for my former peers and colleagues working in athletic offices, because they still have their same fundraising goal,
right? But
now they have an internal competitor for that same dollar, and it's causing a lot of friction.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of, I want to say, jealousy over the fact that the kids are getting all this money.
Right.
I mean, I still have my goal, and I'm sorry, but if you ask me to predict which way this ends, it's going to end on the LLC. Non-school affiliated collective side.
That was my next question to you. Because given your experience and the people and the conversations you've had, which model you think? I think right now they're kind of parallel tracking dual models because there's been no rule set.
Right.
So it's like, if this is a money grab, let's grab as much money as we can, right? And as long as it's legal and within the constructs of whatever law we're trying to follow. So. Well, and you mentioned some other schools. You mentioned some of the bigger schools down south having collectives. Do you know if they have 2 collectives or one collective that's sponsored? Because you mentioned, I think you said Alabama and other people were unaffiliated with the university. So much more like USC student body right. Do they not have a collective that is working with the university either? So
the other issue is that, it's a zero-sum game.
Right.
I mean, your booster and alumni base only has so much dollars.
Right.
So USC is a little unique in the fact that there is enough of booster and support to the program that you can collectively fund 2 collectives now.
Yeah.
Other schools are having a much harder time with that.
Okay.
And I see what some schools are doing is that once a private collective, we'll call that just for conversation's sake, starts to get momentum, you start to see the school affiliated collective slowly pull back, knowing it's kind of punching above their weight class to go that route.
Interesting.
So I think it's going to vary by school, and truthfully, it's going to vary by how much control athletic departments have over inventory and tickets and those things. I mean, obviously in Los Angeles, a much larger market than say College Station.
Right.
So can College Station pull off the collective with the school? Because in College Station, they're the biggest game in town.
Right.
And they can kind of close borders and make it difficult. Or in LA, You know, you got the Lakers, you got the Dodgers, you got everybody. Just go straight to
Clippers,
the
yeah,
kid because
everybody,
they're
right? Rams,
clever. Yeah.
Chargers, yeah. It's like
So I think it's going to be a case by case basis where you see where the school's able to fend off challengers as opposed to traditional major metropolitan areas. I think the schools are going to have a much harder time keeping their kids away from that.
yeah.
Do you like the NIL thing as a whole? I mean, a lot of people want to go back to the old ways.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I'm not necessarily in love with it or think it's the model that's going to work for the future for college football. What I did like seeing was we're breaking the stranglehold the NCAA has had on all this and all these administrators and presidents, because you played football, your brother played football, you know, football players like I do, D1, NFL, etc. Those guys will be bringing in billions of dollars for a university like USC or Miami or, you know, Alabama. And I know them personally, and they can't take their girlfriend to a movie. But oh, by the way, they also can't have a job per NCAA rules. So what do you expect these kids to do? And I'm not, again, I'm not saying they need $1 million and a new car to go play college football, but you're going from one extreme to another. Like, I think there might be some middle ground, but to your last discussion of university affiliated or private LLC, I kind of lean towards private, because if we look at who's getting the benefit, if I'm donating $1 million to USC football as an alumni, I want USC football to get my $1 million, right? And so even if you have to pay tax on it, okay, it's not a deduction or whatever, at least every net dollar that I give is going straight there and straight to the team and the players that I tried to, versus, and this may not be the same at all collectives, you know, countrywide, but I know with USC, that was the discussion, and why student body right became what it did was because, hey, where are these dollars going? Which we see at universities, you see in any bureaucratic environment, right? When dollars come in, it's like, and so that's what was happening in the alumni. I was like, no, we're not changing all these rules in the landscape of college football to get these kids paid, only then to give pennies on the dollars of what I'm actually paying them.
Right.
So if I had to put my economic hat on, the one that the guys that are donating want and the kids want is what's going to win. Right. Because that's how we kind of got to this point to begin with, right? They're finally, somebody's listening to the players versus, oh, they get a college education. Well, you and I both know some guys do. Some guys go and get great degrees and move on from football, but the majority of these guys, they're professional football players just in college, and they're taking sailing and guitar and choir and classes so they stay eligible, pass, and can maintain. And then they get a degree, and these people say, oh, they've got a degree from USC. And I'm like, studying what? And how much studying do you think they did, even if they got an economics degree or a psych degree? They're playing football 365, right? Like, they have tutors that are helping them to get through class. So I'm not shouting at every student athlete out there, but it's just like, let's call spade a spade here. And I think that's finally started to happen, which is why NIL broke. And now we're getting these collectives. And you know, again, it's going to be interesting to watch because the model is changing as we speak. And so it's interesting to be involved. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I know people don't like hearing this, but being a college football player is extremely hard.
Yeah.
I mean, during the season, you're dedicating 60 to 70 hours a week to practice, film, weights, all these things. And they're like, well, there's rules to prevent that. Well, no, they're optional activities.
Exactly.
And well, you'll never see the field.
You don't start if you don't show up to your OTAs.
Right? Absolutely. You got to go to practice. You have to do all those things. And the reality is that all these scholarship agreements, they're 1-year contracts. Yep. So every year you have to sit down with your position coach and your head coach, and they decide if you're getting your scholarship the next year.
That's exactly right.
Now, this might be your 3rd year with a red shirt, and you're 80 credits in, and you know if they don't renew your scholarship, you're not going to graduate.
Yep.
Because you're going to have to transfer schools, and they're not going to accept all 80 of your credits.
Right.
And it's just a nightmare.
Yep.
And then, you know, a lot of student athletes don't graduate. Yep. Not a majority, but there's a good segment of the population because they dedicate so much time for practice and course loads, things like that. That the reality is that once you finish your eligibility, you're on your own. Good luck.
An afterthought. Yep.
They made that a little bit better with the sanctions for graduation rates, but still, it's not great. So I think NIL is long overdue. Back to your point, it's like coaches and players know who can coach and who's just along for the ride.
Totally.
Every staff doesn't have a genius at every position.
That's right.
For the backup strength and conditioning coach or the tight end coach to be making $1.2 to $1.5 million to coach at the University of Rutgers is insane. So these players earn the money. The reality is the best players have always gotten paid. That's just the nature of it. But now they're getting better offers because it's a free market. Right. Oh, Texas A&M offered me this. What are you going to do? And it's going to work out better for the players. the game's going to change, but it's always been this way. I mean, going back to the 60s and 70s, you can name the 10 blue blood programs. They've won 4 quarters of the national title. It's not
Yep.
going to change.
Yep. I agree. So like I said, I don't know that the model as it sits now is the right model and what's going to sustain into the future. I just like that the conversation started and this shakeup started, so touching on NIL and collectives a little bit, this all kind of bleeds into the conversation with the portal, right? Because to what you just said, if you are a student athlete that's having issues or doesn't renew a scholarship or all this, you now have the freedom and the ability to go somewhere, get a scholarship and start playing versus, red shirt or, whatever rules were around transfers in the past seem to have opened up. Now, again, not saying it's the best thing for college football. Like if this happens every offseason, I don't know. What is it going to look like next offseason? It's going to be tough to be as chaotic as it was this last season because we had so many head coaches turnover, right? I don't think you're going to have the coaching carousel next year that we had this year, but there's still going to be this stuff. And I don't know what the right answer is. All I know is the conversation needed to get started, and NIL and transfer portal and these collectives have done that. And so that's what I'm happy with. It's to bring in something that's also controversial in a different sport, but I see it a lot like Live Golf versus PGA Tour, the NCAA versus these student athletes, because their golfers are independent contractors and the PGA Tour telling them when and where they can't play. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If I'm an employee and have a contract and you pay me, great. If I'm an independent 1099 individual, I can do whatever the hell I want. And that wasn't really the case. And so here you're getting an uproar in a different sport, much like we're getting in college football, because there was no payment, but it's all held under this student athlete definition. A great South Park episode. I encourage you to watch it if you've never seen it. They clown on the NCAA for that definition simply because is what I looked a lot into the legal stuff of the NCAA when we got hit, right? Steve McNair got hit individually and unreasonably, but that's a different discussion. The point being is that's when I started to read a lot of the NCAA bylaws and what they're all about. And I'm like, this is crap. But the way they're getting away with it is that definition. Student athlete covers everything. So no worry about paying. He's getting a degree. He's a student athlete. Oh, we can do this because he's a student athlete. And I'm like, well, that's leaving the window. They're still student athletes, but now they're going to be athletes, probably athlete students, which is what they should have been, because that's how they, like you said, 70, 80 hours a week. But that's just your commitment, let alone how you sleeping. How's your knee that just got popped in the last game, or your forearm or your head from a concussion? So yeah, you got 70 hours, but you're not functioning outside of those 70 hours at a high level. So you're going to go take, mathematics in 500 level classes and get good grades. No, it's just not realistic. So I don't know. I'm just glad the conversation started and looking forward to that. These kids are going to get some benefit. There's going to be some shakeout and some unintended consequences, which we're already seeing, but I think eventually there will be a way to work this out. I just don't know that the NCAA is going to be who governs it.
I'm getting the impression you're not a big fan of the NCAA.
I lost a lot of love for the NCAA when what happened to my school. Not because I'm saying we didn't take liberties or things, there wasn't a reason to get a slap on the wrist, but I was at school there and in the locker room, and I have friends from programs around the country. So nothing that was going on at USC is different than I've seen at every other school where I know people. And so it's like, this is just kind of the under the rug thing. And they made it seem like Reggie Bush got paid all that. I'm like, you guys didn't even read. Like, the reason we got hit was because Reggie's stepfather, not his real dad, in San Diego, which is 150 miles from campus, was taking rent payments for his house that Reggie didn't live in from a convicted felon who wanted to be an agent to sign Reggie. And we got pinned with paying Reggie. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Why would anybody at USC want Reggie Bush to leave early? And I asked that question and people can't answer. And I said, because you don't understand what happened. And so what the NCAA did was make up a rule when they slapped us. They called it lack of institutional control. He should have known. And I'm like, okay, so now we're starting to get away from the law and we're getting into opinion. So you're saying that every head coach of every D1 football program needs to know what the step parents of each player on his team are doing, no matter where they are in the country. Otherwise, you're going to get hit by the NCAA. And that's why I wanted support from the Pac-12 and all this. Not saying we hadn't beat up on them for a while and taken some liberties, but more or less like, do you guys not see what's going on here? This is judge, jury, executioner. They don't have to answer anybody. There is no court. They have their own committee of infractions that make the rules and, judge those rules. So I just, that's when I started paying attention to student athletes who were complaining about what the NCAA can't have a job, can't take any money, can't take my girlfriend to school. And all that wrapped in, I just went, the NCAA is a scam, because they don't seem like to me like they're trying to help the student athletes. They collect a lot of money, and that basketball tournament they do gets a lot of money. But it's all, well, they get degrees. That's what we do for our student athletes. And I'm like, okay. So my opinion was kind of crystallized back there. And moving into this, I frankly thought the NCAA would have blown up before, because I think this was about 2008 when I started digging in. I thought, to give it 10 years, these guys aren't going to exist. This is unlawful. It's unbelievable, but everything's
Well,
slower.
I think that prophecies came true. I mean,
Yep.
I think North Carolina proved how you deal with the NCAA. You ignore them.
You ignore them.
You say you have no authority and go away. And that was 3 or 4 years after the USC stuff. And the NCAA is basically a powerless organization.
Yep.
People ignore them. The schools are going to police themselves. And that's why you're seeing all these breakthroughs with the portal and NIL. I mean, 100%. I think you were right.
I think that's progress. Like I said, progress doesn't always feel clean and smooth. You know, to break things, sometimes an explosion needs to happen, and explosions aren't pretty. But I do think at least the root issue that I've been concerned with from the student athlete perspective is being addressed. May not be the right way or the way it's going to be in the future, but at least they're being heard. And that, to me, makes college football kind of exciting again. And that may change. My opinion may change, right? People are whipping around colleges and conferences, and all of a sudden there's no continuity. No, I don't want that. But I'm also can't tell a kid he shouldn't transfer because somebody just got recruited that took his spot. Now he's not going to get a scholarship, not making any money. I'm like, dude, you got to do you, right? This is America. So anyway, any final closing thoughts? I think we did about 90 minutes here, which is a good run for the first go.
I like San Diego State -6 this week. So that's my week. Take a look at that. And thank you for having me on, Travis. And it's best time of the year. College football season is about to start.
Aaron, I really appreciate you. Always love talking to you. Good luck with all your fandom and teams this season. But really, really thankful to have you on for the first one of these. It was a lot of fun, and we'll definitely get you back on here maybe mid or late season so we can review some of the calls we made.
See how dumb I look for putting Iowa.
It might be
fun. Can't wait. Yeah,
it might be me that looks dumb, but anyway, right on. Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for listening in and watching. We really appreciate you. Yeah, the first episode of the Crazy Collective. Thanks. Have a great day.